Imagine standing in front of a painting you've seen 100 times, maybe in a textbook, a museum, or even as a screensaver. It looks familiar, comforting, like a story you already know. But what if I told you that story is a lie, or at least it's not the whole truth? Behind the brushstrokes of Europe's most famous masterpieces, there's a hidden layer of history, one that artists risked their lives to preserve. These works aren't just beautiful, they're time capsules packed with secrets too dangerous to write down. For centuries, they've been hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to look closer. Take Jan van Eyck's Arnolfini Portrait, where a tiny mirror reflects shadowy figures who shouldn't be there, or Bruegel's Tower of Babel, where the chaotic construction site isn't just about the Bible, it's a coded critique of political tyranny. Even Botticelli's Primavera, with its graceful dancers, whispers about the Medici family's backroom deals. These artists weren't just painting, they were documenting truths that could get them killed, smuggling forbidden ideas into the open under the guise of myth and religion. They turned canvas into camouflage and symbols into survival. Today, we're going to decode 21 of these paintings, peeling back layers of paint to reveal the stories they were never supposed to tell. You'll see how a single color, a hidden object, or even the angle of a shadow can rewrite history. This isn't just about art, it's about power, rebellion, and the courage to speak truth when the world demands silence. By the end, you'll never look at these familiar masterpieces the same way again. So lean in, because history isn't always written in books. Sometimes it's hiding in the frame. Medieval artists didn't just paint what they saw, they painted what they meant. And every brushstroke was a deliberate choice. Imagine a world where speaking your mind could land you in prison or worse. Art became the ultimate loophole, a way to communicate dangerous truths under the guise of beauty. Take something as simple as a flower. A lily wasn't just a pretty detail. It was a flashing neon sign pointing to purity, often used to hint at the Virgin Mary's virtue. But here's the twist. That same lily could also symbolize a political alliance, like the fleur de lis of the French monarchy, subtly staking a claim in a religious scene. Animals were another layer of this visual code. A dog at a couple's feet. On the surface, it's a sign of loyalty, but dig deeper, and it might represent a specific noble family known for their hunting hounds, quietly asserting their presence in the painting. Even colors were loaded with meaning. Red wasn't just vibrant, it screamed sacrifice, martyrdom, or even the blood of a fallen rival. Artists played with these symbols like chess pieces, arranging them to tell one story for the censors and another for those in the know. This wasn't just artistic flair, it was survival. When the church or crown controlled the official narrative, symbolism became a way to preserve forbidden knowledge. A scholar might hide astronomical charts in the folds of a saint's robe, or a painter could encode a rebel's face among the crowd in a biblical scene. The key was making it just obscure enough to avoid detection but clear enough for the right eyes to spot. And here's what's fascinating, these symbols weren't static. A rose in one century might represent divine love, while in another, it could signal a secret society's meeting place. The same painting could carry different messages depending on who was looking and when. That's why decoding them today is like piecing together a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape. So as we explore these 21 paintings, remember, every detail is a clue. The mirror isn't just a mirror, the fruit isn't just fruit, and the shadow in the corner, that's where the real story begins. Jan van Eyck's Arnolfini Portrait is more than just a stunning display of 15th century wealth. It's a puzzle box of hidden meanings. At first glance, we see a well-dressed couple standing in a lavish room, their hands clasped as if in marriage. But the real intrigue lies in that small, convex mirror hanging on the back wall. Look closely and you'll spot two shadowy figures reflected in its curved surface. Who are they? Some scholars believe one is Van Eyck himself, inserting his presence as a silent witness. Others argue they represent legal or religious officials, turning this seemingly private moment into a formal contract. The mirror isn't just a clever trick of perspective, it's a statement. Its frame is decorated with 10 miniature scenes from Christ's Passion, a deliberate choice that transforms the couple's union into something sacred, almost divine. But here's the twist: convex mirrors were luxury items, symbols of wealth and knowledge. By including it, Van Eyck might have been hinting at the Arnolfini's political connections or even their role in a hidden diplomatic alliance. The reflection distorts reality, just as the painting itself distorts the truth behind this moment. Then there's the chandelier. A single candle burns in the daylight, a detail that seems odd until you realize it's a symbol of the Flemish custom of the marriage candle, lit during wedding ceremonies. But why only one? Some speculate it signifies the absence of one partner, perhaps Giovanni Arnolfini's first wife, who may have died before this portrait was commissioned. The dog at their feet, often a symbol of fidelity, might also carry a darker meaning, a reminder of loyalty tested by loss. Every object in this room is a clue. The oranges on the windowsill aren't just decorative, they're a nod to Mediterranean trade, a silent boast of the couple's mercantile power. The discarded shoes. In medieval symbolism, bare feet marked sacred ground, suggesting this space is more than a home, it's a site of solemn vows. Even the bed's red curtains evoke the marriage bed, a visual cue that this painting might be less about a portrait and more about a legal record. Van Eyck's genius was in layering these symbols so densely that the painting could be read multiple ways. To the casual observer, it's a celebration of love and prosperity. To those in the know, it's a coded document, a snapshot of a moment with stakes far higher than a simple wedding. The mirror then becomes the key, reflecting not just the room, but the hidden networks of power, faith, and politics that shaped the Arnolfini's world. And in that reflection, Van Eyck leaves us with a question: how many other secrets are hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to see them? Pieter Bruegel, the Elder's Tower of Babel, is a masterpiece of misdirection. On the surface, it's a vivid retelling of the biblical story, a towering structure reaching for the heavens, doomed to collapse by divine intervention. But look closer, and the painting transforms into something far more daring, a razor-sharp critique of the Habsburg Empire, disguised as scripture. Bruegel lived under the rule of Philip II of Spain, a monarch notorious for crushing dissent with brutal efficiency. In this climate, direct criticism was suicide, so the artist wielded his brush like a smuggler's tool, packing the canvas with subversive details that escaped the censor's notice. Take the tower itself, a jumbled mess of architectural styles. Roman arches butt against Gothic spires, while half-finished staircases lead nowhere. This wasn't just artistic license, it mirrored the Habsburgs' mismatched empire, a patchwork of territories held together by force. The workers swarming the structure tell an even darker story. Some haul stones uphill, only for others to let them roll back down. A few hammer futilely at the foundations, while others dangle precariously from ropes. This isn't just chaos, it's a metaphor for resistance under occupation, endless labor with no real progress, a system designed to exhaust rebellion. And then there's King Nimrod, the biblical tyrant who ordered the tower built. Bruegel renders him as a tiny, almost laughable figure at the painting's base, dwarfed by his own ambition. No one pays him any attention. not the workers, not even the nobles trailing behind him. It's a sly dig at Philip II, whose decrees often ignored the reality on the ground. The real power here isn't the king, it's the collective futility of the people, trapped in a cycle they can't escape. But Bruegel's boldest statement might be the tower's shadow. It stretches ominously over the port below, where ships unload yet more supplies. This isn't just a construction project, it's an economic black hole, draining resources for a doomed cause. Sound familiar? To Bruegel's audience, it would have echoed Spain's endless wars in the Low Countries, bleeding the region dry. The painting even includes a subtle anachronism, cranes modeled after contemporary Antwerp's dockyards, yanking the biblical tale into the present day. What makes this work so revolutionary isn't just its message, it's how Bruegel delivered it. By wrapping dissent in a familiar biblical package, he ensured the painting would hang in respectable homes, even royal collections. The church couldn't object to a scene from Genesis, and the Habsburgs missed the joke entirely. Today, we recognize it for what it truly is, a protest manifesto in oil, proof that art could outwit empires when words alone would fail. Bruegel didn't just paint a tower, he built a Trojan horse. Botticelli's Primavera is a feast for the eyes, a lush garden where mythological figures dance beneath a canopy of blossoms. But beneath its idyllic surface lies a web of Medici intrigue painted in code. Take Mercury, the figure on the far left, turning his back on the scene with an almost dismissive gesture. While most assume he's simply ushering in spring, his isolation might hint at Lorenzo de' Medici's estranged cousin, Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco, who was quietly maneuvering against the family's dominant branch. Botticelli, keenly aware of these tensions, could have been signaling the fractures within Florence's ruling dynasty, risky business for an artist whose livelihood depended on their favor. Then there's the trio known as the Three Graces, their intertwined dance radiating harmony. Yet their delicate steps mirror the delicate balance of power the Medici maintained through strategic marriages. The central grace, often identified as Simonetta Vespucci, turns toward Chloris, a nymph transforming into Flora, the goddess of flowers. Simonetta was the muse of Lorenzo's inner circle, but her premature death left her memory as a political symbol. By linking her to rebirth, Botticelli might have been suggesting the Medici's ability to reinvent themselves, even after scandals or coups, but the real smoking gun is the orange grove. These weren't just any trees, they were a direct reference to the Medici's private gardens at their Villa di Castello, where secret negotiations unfolded away from prying eyes. The golden fruits, glowing like coins, nod to the family's banking empire, the engine of their influence. Even the painting's flowers carry weight. The scattered violets, for instance, were a Medici emblem, while the myrtle wreath worn by Venus symbolized clandestine love, hinting at hushed alliances sealed through betrothals or affairs. Botticelli's genius was his ability to make flattery look like folklore. To the untrained eye, Primavera was a celebration of beauty and myth. To the Medici and their allies, it was a visual dossier, a reminder that every blossom, every gesture held a meaning only they could decipher. The painting's very survival suggests the message was delivered well. Offend no one outright, but let those in power see themselves reflected in the art. After all, the best secrets aren't hidden in darkness. They're draped in sunlight, where only the right eyes will think to look. Hieronymus Bosch's garden of earthly delights isn't just a bizarre menagerie of sin and salvation. It's a time capsule of forbidden thought. At first glance, the central panel overwhelms with its teeming crowds of nude figures, exotic fruits, and fantastical creatures. Art historians long dismissed it as a cautionary tale about indulgence, but the truth is far more radical. Those androgynous bodies, intertwined without shame, mirror the teachings of the Brethren of the Free Spirit, a heretical movement that preached divine unity so absolute it erased gender, class, even morality. To them, paradise wasn't a distant reward, it was a present reality accessible to anyone who awakened to their own divinity. The Church declared this belief dangerous, not just wrong, but unforgivable. By 1312, the sect was hunted to near extinction. Yet here, decades later, Bosch resurrects their vision under the Inquisition's nose. Look closely at the painting's structure. Unlike traditional religious art, there's no hierarchy, no saints towering over sinners, no God presiding from the clouds. Instead, humanity exists in a flat, circular paradise, echoing the Brethren's belief that all people were equally divine. Even the figures' poses defy convention. Some float weightlessly, others embrace without restraint, their bodies forming living mandalas. This wasn't just artistic flair, it was a direct challenge to the Church's rigid order. The Brethren taught that rituals and clergy were unnecessary, salvation came from within. Bosch's composition argues the same, removing priests and popes from the equation entirely. Then there's the symbolism hiding in plain sight. The oversized strawberries and cherries weren't just erotic metaphors. They represented the fruits of knowledge the Brethren believed could liberate the soul. The translucent orbs cradled by figures, likely references to the mirror of wisdom, a key symbol in their secret texts. Even the bizarre hybrid creatures, part human, part plant, align with accounts of the sect's rituals where followers sought to transcend physical form. Bosch didn't invent these details, he documented them, knowing full well the risk. What's truly chilling is the triptych's original audience. Commissioned for the royal house of Nassau, it hung in a palace where church officials dined. Bosch essentially framed heresy as entertainment, trusting that the Inquisition would see only absurdity, not doctrine. The left panel showing Eden and the right depicting hell acted as bookends to excuse the center's radicalism. To the untrained eye, it was a moral fable. To those who knew the signs, it was a manifesto. Bosch's genius was in making heresy look like hallucination. By the time authorities realized what they were seeing, the garden had already seeded its message. Today, we recognize it not as a warning against sin, but as a defiant act of preservation, a stolen glimpse into a world where heaven wasn't earned but remembered. And in that, Bosch proved the most dangerous idea of all, that art could outlast even the fires meant to silence it. Vermeer's The Art of Painting is a masterclass in quiet subversion. At first glance, it's a serene scene, an artist meticulously capturing Clio, the muse of history, in a sunlit studio. But every element in this 1666 work pulses with political tension. That massive map dominating the back wall isn't just decoration, it's a cartographic grenade, depicting the Netherlands before its independence from Spain in 1648. It freezes a moment when the Dutch were still fighting for sovereignty. By the time Vermeer picked up his brush, the war was technically over, but the scars remained. The map's prominence suggests unresolved grievances, as if the artist was saying, "This is who we were, never forget." Then there's Clio herself, draped in blue silk and crowned with a laurel wreath, the traditional symbol of victory. But here's the catch, she's turned away from the viewer, her face obscured. History, Vermeer seems to whisper, isn't a straightforward triumph. That laurel might celebrate Dutch independence, but her averted gaze hints at the cost. The Protestant Dutch Republic had spent decades erasing Catholic influences from their national identity, rewriting history to fit their new narrative. Clio's pose mirrors this selective memory, her obscured face representing the stories left untold. Even the studio itself is a carefully constructed illusion. The heavy tapestry pulled back to reveal the scene mimics how history is curated, certain truths displayed, others tucked away. The artist's easel stands between Clio and the map, as if mediating between past and present. Vermeer, a Catholic living in a fiercely Protestant society, would have understood this balancing act intimately. His inclusion of the map's creases, almost like wounds, suggests a land still healing from division. But the most audacious detail, the chandelier bears the Habsburg double-headed eagle, a symbol of the very Spanish rule the Dutch had overthrown. It's unlit, dangling uselessly, yet it remains. Vermeer doesn't erase the past, he preserves its ghost, a silent reminder that history isn't cleanly divided into before and after. The painting's original title, The Allegory of Painting, takes on new meaning. It's not just about art, but about the stories we choose to paint over. In a nation busy reinventing itself, Vermeer's work became a time capsule, preserving the contradictions others wanted to forget. The map, the muse, even the dust motes in the sunlight, all whisper the same truth. Victory is never as simple as it seems, and history, when painted honestly, always carries shadows. Hans Holbein, the Younger's The Ambassadors, appears to be a straightforward celebration of Renaissance learning and diplomacy. Two richly dressed men surrounded by scientific instruments and worldly treasures. But this 1533 masterpiece is actually a ticking time bomb of political and religious tension, painted with the precision of a spy's coded message. Start with that infamous distorted skull stretching across the foreground. While most viewers focus on it as a classic memento mori, its grotesque elongation only resolves when viewed from the extreme side, a visual trick that forces us to question our perspective. That's the key to the entire painting. Nothing is as it seems when viewed head-on. The shelves between the two men are a carefully curated battlefield of ideologies. A Lutheran hymn book lies open beside a Catholic celestial globe, their proximity anything but accidental. This was the year Henry VIII secretly married Anne Boleyn, setting England on a collision course with the Pope. The hymn book's visible page features Martin Luther's translation of Veni Creator Spiritus, a hymn about divine guidance, a brazen inclusion for a Catholic court painter like Holbein. The globe itself shows Rome marked prominently, but it's positioned directly above a terrestrial globe displaying the ambassador's native France, visually crushing it. Was Holbein hinting at the coming collapse of Catholic dominance? Then there's the broken lute string, often overlooked amidst the painting's grandeur. In musical symbolism, a snapped string represented discord and impending rupture. Within months of this painting's completion, Henry would declare himself head of the Church of England, severing ties with Rome. The lute itself rests atop a book of arithmetic open to a division problem, another not-so-subtle nod to religious schism. Even the ambassador's poses tell a story. Jean de Dintville, the French envoy on the left, grips a dagger inscribed with his age, 29. His companion, Bishop Georges de Selve, rests his arm on a book, his fingers pressing down as if to suppress its contents. At 35, he was already witnessing the unraveling of everything his position stood for. But the real genius lies in what's missing. The lower shelf holds a crucifix, half obscured behind a curtain, an eerie foreshadowing of how faith would soon be sidelined by politics. The instruments surrounding it aren't just scholarly props, they're warnings. The sundial shows the date as April 11th, the exact day de Selve arrived in England to negotiate between Henry and the Pope. The quadrant and torquetum aren't merely scientific tools. They measure celestial angles, mirroring how the king was calculating the risks of his defiance. Holbein painted this for an audience who could read between the lines. The skull's distortion forces us to shift our viewpoint to see the truth. just as England would have to radically alter its spiritual alignment to survive the coming storm. Every object in this opulent scene is a chess piece in a game of throne and altar, where the stakes weren't just power but salvation itself. And in that broken string, Holbein left us the faintest sound of an empire cracking under its own weight. Albrecht Dürer's Melancholia isn't just a haunting depiction of brooding genius, it's a mathematical manifesto disguised as art. At first glance, the engraving overwhelms with its dense symbolism. A winged figure slumped in thought, scattered tools, a sleeping dog, and that eerie, unfinished stone polyhedron looming in the background. But every element here is a calculated risk, a rebellion etched in geometry. Take the so-called magic square floating in the upper right, its numbers adding up to 34 in every direction. To the untrained eye, it's a curious puzzle. To Renaissance scholars, it was a beacon, a reference to the Kabbalistic tradition where numbers held divine power, a tradition the Church increasingly viewed as heresy. The figure at the center, often labeled as the personification of melancholy, might be something far more dangerous, a portrait of the persecuted intellectual. Her wings suggest aspiration, but the compass in her hand, a tool for precise measurement, hints at why she's grounded. During the Reformation, mathematics and the occult were intertwined, both seen as threats to religious orthodoxy. Dürer's intricate geometric forms, like the truncated rhombohedron, weren't just artistic flourishes, they were covert celebrations of the very knowledge authorities sought to suppress. That polyhedron, with its impossible angles, mirrors the tension between faith and reason, a shape that shouldn't exist, much like the ideas it represents. Even the bat's banner, fluttering ominously across the sky, carries a loaded message. The date inscribed 1514 wasn't chosen at random. That year marked peasant uprisings and anti-clerical protests across Germany, a time when questioning authority could be deadly. By linking the bat's ominous presence to this date, Dürer ties intellectual despair to real-world repression. The bat itself, a creature of darkness, becomes a symbol of the Church's shadow over free thought, its wingspan casting a pall over the scene below. But the most subversive detail might be the tools strewn across the foreground. A saw, a plane, even a crucible. These aren't just random objects, they're the instruments of creation, abandoned in frustration. The hourglass beside them marks time running out, not just for the figure, but for an era when knowledge was becoming a crime. Dürer, a master of both art and mathematics, understood the stakes. His meticulous lines and perfect proportions were acts of defiance, proving that even in a climate of suspicion, truth could be etched in ink and passed hand to hand. What makes Melancholia so revolutionary isn't just its symbolism, but its silence. Unlike fiery pamphlets or public speeches, this engraving couldn't be burned or banned. It hung in studies and workshops, its message hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who knew how to read between the lines. Today, we recognize it not as a lament, but as a rallying cry, a reminder that even in the darkest times, geometry could be a language of resistance. Raphael's school of Athens is more than a celebration of classical wisdom. It's a daring act of scientific sabotage, painted right onto the Vatican's walls. At first glance, the fresco seems to honor the great minds of antiquity, with Plato and Aristotle commanding the center. But tucked away in the shadows, the brooding figure of Heraclitus, deliberately modeled after Michelangelo, holds a secret. The geometric diagrams scrawled on his slate aren't just random sketches. They mirror the celestial calculations of Nicolaus Copernicus, whose radical heliocentric theory wouldn't be published for another 30 years. Imagine the audacity. Raphael smuggled a forbidden truth into the heart of the Church, decades before Galileo would face trial for defending the same idea. The fresco's architecture is another layer of rebellion. The vaulted arches and coffered ceilings aren't merely decorative, they align with actual celestial patterns. During the equinoxes, sunlight streaming through the Vatican's windows casts shadows that trace the paths of planets, as if the building itself whispers the movements of the cosmos. This wasn't just artistic flair, it was a covert lesson in astronomy, hidden in plain sight. Even the positioning of the figures is a clue. Plato points upward to the heavens, while Aristotle gestures toward the earth, their debate echoing the tension between old dogma and emerging science. But the real genius lies in the details only scholars would notice. The books tucked under Pythagoras' arm include diagrams of harmonic ratios that later influenced Kepler's laws of planetary motion. The globe near Ptolemy's feet isn't the Earth-centric model the Church endorsed, it's subtly tilted, hinting at a universe where Earth wasn't the center. Raphael, a favorite of Pope Julius II, played a dangerous game. By embedding these heresies in a scene celebrating approved ancient knowledge, he ensured the fresco's survival. The Church couldn't object to honoring Plato, even if his modern heirs threatened everything they taught. What makes this fresco so revolutionary isn't just its hidden messages, but its location. This wasn't some private study or obscure chapel, it was the Vatican's Stanza della Signatura, the very room where papal decrees were signed. Every day, cardinals and diplomats walked beneath these painted vaults, oblivious to the cosmic truth overhead. Raphael didn't just depict philosophers, he turned the Vatican into a classroom for a future it wasn't ready to admit. The School of Athens endures as a testament to art's power, not just to adorn walls, but to bend the arc of history, one brushstroke at a time. Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew isn't just a dramatic moment frozen in paint. It's a meticulously staged piece of propaganda with a hidden edge. The beam of light slicing through the darkness isn't random. It's a celestial timestamp. Caravaggio calculated the angle to match the exact sunlight that would flood a Roman street on September 21st, the feast day of St. Matthew. This wasn't just technical brilliance, it was theological theater. The year 1600 was a jubilee year when the Church doubled down on calls for conversion, and Caravaggio's painting became a visual sermon. That shaft of light, its divine intervention on a schedule, engineered to coincide with the very day priests would preach about Matthew's redemption. But look closer at the figures huddled around the table. Their clothing isn't the flowing robes of biblical Palestine, it's the tight doublets and feathered caps of German mercenaries. In an era when Protestantism was spreading like wildfire from the north, this was a loaded detail. Tax collectors were already reviled figures, but dressing them as Germans turned them into stand-ins for the heretics the Church feared. The man in the center, face half-shadowed as he counts coins, wears a slashed sleeve style popular among Lutheran soldiers. Even the way he hesitates, fingers lingering on the money, mirrors the Catholic narrative of Protestant greed. Caravaggio knew his audience. Rome's elite would read the message instantly. Yet the real subversion lies in what's not illuminated. The figure at the far left, often identified as Matthew, points to himself in disbelief, but his gesture also echoes Martin Luther's famous defense, "Here I stand." The light bypasses him entirely, falling instead on the younger man beside him, as if suggesting true conversion requires humility, not defiance. It's a quiet rebuttal to Protestant individualism, painted with the precision of a theological debate. And then there's the setting. The dank, windowless room feels more like a Roman back alley than a holy scene, grounding the divine in the grime of everyday life. This wasn't just realism, it was a challenge. Caravaggio's patrons wanted a glorified recruitment poster, but the artist smuggled in uncomfortable truths. The grubby fingernails, the worn cards on the table, the way the tax collectors instinctively recoil from the light, none of this feels like triumphant conversion. It feels like resistance. By anchoring the scene to a specific date and place, Caravaggio did something radical. He made scripture feel urgent, immediate, almost dangerous. The light doesn't just reveal Matthew, it exposes the tensions simmering beneath Rome's polished surface. And in those German doublets, he left a clue, a reminder that faith, like art, is never as simple as it seems. Grünewald's Isenheim altarpiece isn't just a religious masterpiece, it's a medical textbook disguised as devotion, commissioned for a hospital treating victims of St. Anthony's fire, a gruesome condition caused by ergot poisoning. Every brushstroke served a dual purpose. The crucified Christ's agonized expression and sickly green skin weren't just artistic choices, they mirrored the very patients who would kneel before it, their limbs blackened by gangrene, their bodies racked with pain. For these suffering souls, the painting wasn't a metaphor, it was a mirror, assuring them their torment was seen, even sanctified. But Grünewald went further, embedding practical healing into the sacred scene. The herbs scattered in the background aren't decorative, they're a pharmacopoeia in pigment. The blooming henbane near John the Baptist's foot, for instance, was used to dull pain, while the mandrake root tucked into the foliage was a medieval anesthetic. Even the peculiar red tint of Christ's wounds matches the vasoconstriction caused by ergot, a detail so precise it suggests the artist collaborated closely with the hospital's monks. In an era when the Church condemned secular medicine as heresy, these botanical clues became a lifeline, a way to share cures under the guise of divine imagery. The altarpiece's folding panels deepen the deception. Closed, it shows the crucifixion in harrowing detail, validating patients' suffering. But opened, it reveals resurrection scenes bursting with color, hope as tangible as the treatments hidden in plain sight. The most startling panel depicts St. Anthony, patron saint of the afflicted, surrounded by grotesque demons. Look closely, and their deformities mimic ergotism's symptoms: contorted limbs, blistered skin. For the monks treating these cases, the imagery was a diagnostic tool, helping them explain the disease's supernatural nickname while subtly guiding care. Grünewald's genius was his ability to smuggle science into worship. The altarpiece's central message, that Christ shared their agony, comforted patients spiritually, while its hidden details offered physical relief. Even the light in the painting serves a purpose. The unnatural glow around Mary Magdalene's jar of ointment draws attention to its contents, likely a reference to the salves used to soothe burning skin. This wasn't just art, it was triage, a silent collaboration between faith and flesh. By encoding medical knowledge in symbols the Church couldn't object to, Grünewald ensured his work would endure. The patients who prayed before it received more than solace. They received treatment, wrapped in the only language powerful enough to protect it, the divine. Today, the Isenheim altarpiece stands as a testament to art's most subversive role, not just to inspire, but to heal, even when the world forbids it. Titian's equestrian portrait of Charles V captures the emperor in a moment of triumph, armor gleaming, face set with determination, but the real story lies in what's missing. Beneath the layers of paint, faint brushstrokes betray a ghostly presence, Mary of Hungary, Charles' sister, and the true power behind the Habsburg throne in the Netherlands. Originally, she stood beside him, a testament to their partnership in ruling Europe's most fractious territories. But after Charles' abdication in 1556, her figure vanished, scrubbed from the canvas as thoroughly as she was erased from official records. This wasn't just artistic revision. It was historical airbrushing, a deliberate act to downplay the role of a woman who governed with iron competence for nearly 2 decades. The pentimenti, those ghostly traces of overpainting, tell a tale of calculated omission. In an era when female rulers were viewed as temporary placeholders, Mary's erasure reflects the anxiety her power provoked. She negotiated treaties, suppressed rebellions, and even outmaneuvered the Ottoman Empire's diplomats, all while technically holding the title of regent. Titian's original composition acknowledged this reality, showing her as a co-equal. But once Charles retired to a monastery and Mary's influence waned, the painting was sanitized, conforming to a narrative that couldn't tolerate a woman sharing the frame with history's so-called great men. Yet Titian, ever the master of subtext, left clues in the horse's posture. The animal rears dramatically, its muscles taut with energy, but Charles' grip on the reins holds it in check. This isn't just a display of imperial control. It's a metaphor for the Habsburgs' precarious position after the Schmalkaldic War. The conflict had drained their treasury and exposed cracks in their dominance, forcing Charles to rely on Mary's political savvy more than ever. The horse's restrained fury mirrors the empire's reality. All show no room to gallop, even the landscape behind them. A stormy sky breaking into light hints at the turbulence Mary navigated daily. What makes this portrait so revealing isn't just the absence it documents, but the tension it preserves. The longer you study it, the clearer it becomes. Every brushstroke conceals as much as it reveals. The polished armor reflects no surroundings, as if Charles exists in a void, a fitting illusion for an emperor who once ruled half the known world yet couldn't secure his legacy without his sister's invisible hand. Titian's genius was in painting both the official story and its silent counterpoint, proving that even in omission, history leaves fingerprints. Luca's Cranach the Elder's The Golden Age looks like a paradise plucked straight from mythology, a sun-drenched grove where naked figures dance carelessly beneath gilded trees. But this seemingly innocent scene from 1530 is anything but simple. It's a coded manifesto of forbidden knowledge, painted at a time when alchemy could land you in prison or worse. The central fountain, bubbling with crystalline water, isn't just a decorative element. It's the philosopher's stone in liquid form, the holy grail of alchemical pursuit. To the uninitiated, it's a charming detail. To those versed in the secret symbols of the era, it was a bold declaration, the ultimate prize of transmutation, hidden in plain sight. Now look at the dancers. Their circular formation isn't random. It mirrors the chemical wedding, an alchemical allegory where opposing elements, male and female, sun and moon, sulfur and mercury, unite to create perfection. Each pair of figures represents a stage in the process, their intertwined bodies symbolizing the dissolution and recombination of matter. Cranach didn't invent this imagery. He stole it from clandestine manuscripts, translating their diagrams into flesh and motion. The risk was immense. Saxony had outlawed alchemy as heresy, fearing its practitioners could destabilize both religion and economy. Yet here it was, masquerading as a biblical Eden, safe under the guise of piety. Even the trees whisper secrets. Their golden fruit isn't just a nod to classical myths of abundance. It's a visual pun on the alchemist's dream, turning base metals into gold. The fact that Cranach painted these trees with such precision, their branches heavy with metallic-looking orbs, suggests he wasn't just flirting with symbolism. He was embedding instructions. Contemporary alchemists believed nature itself held the key to transmutation, and Cranach's grove mirrors their laboratory sketches, where trees represented the stages of purification. What makes this painting so daring is Cranach's dual identity. As Martin Luther's close friend and the Reformation's chief artist, he enjoyed rare protection. The same man who painted devout Protestant altar pieces also smuggled esoteric knowledge into his secular works, trusting that the church's watchdogs would overlook what they didn't understand. The Golden Age's true brilliance lies in its layers. To the faithful, it's an idyllic vision of prelapsarian harmony. To the alchemist, it's a textbook. And to the authorities, just another pretty scene, harmless as a fairy tale. But Cranach left one final clue: the distant mountains framing the grove. Their jagged peaks resemble the alembics and furnaces of an alchemist's workshop, a landscape of transformation hidden behind the illusion of paradise. In the end, the painting itself becomes a kind of philosopher's stone, transforming the forbidden into the acceptable, the dangerous into the divine. And in that alchemy of artistry, Cranach proved the most subversive truth of all, that sometimes the best way to hide a secret is to paint it in gold. Paolo Uccello's The Battle of San Romano dazzles with its chaotic clash of knights and horses, a vibrant celebration of Florence's military triumph over Siena. But beneath the surface chaos lies a meticulously ordered secret, one that could have gotten the artist branded a heretic. Those shattered lances strewn across the battlefield aren't just random debris. They form perfect geometric arcs and intersecting lines, a hidden language of mathematics disguised as warfare. To the untrained eye, it's artistic flair. To members of Florence's underground mathematical societies, it was a beacon, a silent shout of solidarity in an era when studying Euclid could be condemned as witchcraft. The church feared geometry for the same reason rulers fear maps. It gave people tools to question the world's structure. By the 15th century, groups dedicated to preserving classical mathematics met in shadowed workshops, their compasses and protractors as dangerous as any weapon. Uccello, obsessed with perspective, was almost certainly one of them. His fallen knight isn't just a casualty of war, he's a martyr to knowledge. The compass rose emblazoned on his shield wasn't a random heraldic device. It was the symbol of these clandestine scholars, a nod to the instruments they used to measure a universe the church insisted revolved around dogma. Even the painting's composition betrays its true purpose. The converging lines of lances and horses don't just create depth, they trace the precise angles of Euclidean theorems. The fallen soldier in the foreground, his body rigid in death, forms a perfect isosceles triangle with his outstretched arm and discarded sword. Uccello didn't just paint a battle, he encrypted a classroom, turning bloodshed into a lesson in sacred geometry. What makes this series revolutionary isn't just its hidden message, but its survival. Displayed in the Medici palace, the paintings flaunted their secrets in the home of Florence's most powerful family, proof that art could shield subversion under patronage. The church might burn manuscripts, but they'd hesitate to destroy a masterpiece commissioned by the Medici. Uccello's genius was turning violence into velvet, wrapping dissent in gilded frames where it could whisper to future generations. Those broken lances, they weren't just the remnants of a battle. They were the shattered chains of ignorance waiting for someone to piece them back into truth. Hans Memling's The Last Judgment should have been a straightforward commission, a dramatic triptych destined for a wealthy Florentine banker's private chapel. But fate and a crew of opportunistic pirates had other plans. Seized off the coast of Normandy in 1467, the painting never reached its intended patron, instead winding up in a Polish cathedral where its secrets would gather dust for centuries. Those secrets, it turns out, were explosive. Beneath layers of yellowed varnish, modern infrared imaging uncovered something unimaginable for its time. Hebrew letters scrawled across the scrolls clutched by the damned souls in hell. This wasn't just an artistic anomaly, it was a smoking gun, proof that Memling had contact with Jewish scholars at the precise moment when Europe was expelling or forcibly converting their communities. The letters themselves are fragmented, but their presence alone is staggering. In an era when Jewish texts were burned and their speakers banished, these hidden inscriptions suggest Memling may have consulted Hebrew scriptures to depict the afterlife, a taboo collaboration that could have ruined him. The scroll's wording is deliberately blurred, as if the artist feared his sources might be recognized. But the implication is clear. This last judgment doesn't just reflect Christian dogma. It whispers of a dialogue between faiths, a conversation the Church was determined to silence. Then there's St. Michael, the archangel tasked with weighing souls. His armor should be the familiar plate mail of European knights, but instead, it shimmers with intricate designs borrowed from Ottoman metallurgy, the very empire then devouring Christian territories. This wasn't an aesthetic choice, it was a provocation. While papal sermons painted the Turks as godless barbarians, Memling's Michael mirrors their craftsmanship, suggesting the enemy might be more than mindless savagery. The angel's sword, poised to strike, even curves slightly like a scimitar, a detail that would have screamed heresy to contemporary viewers. The triptych's journey adds another layer of irony. Captured by pirates, the very lawlessness it condemns, the painting became a pawn in the trade wars between Mediterranean powers. Its seizure meant it survived the bonfires of Savonarola's purges in Florence, where similar artworks were destroyed as vanity. The pirates unwittingly preserved a masterpiece that subverted the very order they preyed upon. Memling's genius lies in his contradictions. The damned writhe in torment, yet their scrolls bear traces of a shared intellectual heritage. Michael triumphs over evil, yet his armor honors the culture he's meant to repel. Even the pirate's theft becomes a perverse salvation, ensuring the painting's survival long enough for us to decode its hidden debates. What was intended as a private meditation on divine justice became instead a public testament to all the truths that couldn't be spoken aloud, written in ink, then scrubbed away but never truly gone. Giotto's Scrovegni Chapel frescoes shimmer with heavenly blues and golds, a visual hymn to redemption, except for one glaring exception. In the scene of Judah's betrayal, the traitor's halo remains stubbornly intact, glowing above his head even as he clutches his 30 pieces of silver. This isn't an artistic oversight, it's a theological grenade. While tradition dictated that halos vanish at the moment of sin, Giotto's choice to preserve Judah's radiance aligns perfectly with the teachings of the Fraticelli, a radical offshoot of the Franciscans who preached that no soul was beyond salvation. Their movement was gaining dangerous momentum in 1305, the very year these frescoes were painted, and the same year the Church launched their brutal suppression. The Fraticelli weren't just reformers, they were revolutionaries. They rejected papal authority, lived in absolute poverty, and most controversially, insisted that even the worst sinners retained a divine spark. To them, Judas wasn't a damned villain but a tragic figure who might still find grace. Giotto's halo then becomes a silent protest, a brushstroke of defiance against the rising tide of Inquisition. The chapel's patron, Enrico Scrovegni, was a wealthy moneylender desperate to atone for his father's usury, a man who would have sympathized with the Fraticelli's message of universal mercy. But the real smoking gun hangs overhead. The chapel's starry ceiling isn't just decorative, it's a celestial clock frozen at a specific moment. Researchers have discovered that the constellations mirror the night sky over Padua on March 7, 1305, the date of the Fraticelli leader Fra Dulcino's execution. His followers were burned at the stake, their ashes scattered to erase their heresy. Yet here, in a private chapel just miles from where the pyres burned, Giotto immortalized their beliefs in pigment and plaster. The stars themselves bear witness, their positions an encrypted eulogy for a movement the Church tried to erase. Even the composition whispers rebellion. Judas, though isolated, is framed by a doorway that mirrors the chapel's actual entrance, as if inviting viewers to step into his story and perhaps his redemption. The Fraticelli's suppression relied on painting them as fanatics, but Giotto's frescoes offer a counter-narrative. That mercy isn't a privilege doled out by institutions, but a right woven into the cosmos. What makes these frescoes so revolutionary isn't just their hidden message, but their survival. While the Fraticelli's texts were burned and their leaders silenced, Giotto's art endured, protected by the very wealth and power it subtly undermined. The Scrovegni Chapel stands as a testament to art's power to preserve what history tries to destroy, proving that even in the darkest nights, some stars refuse to fade. Velázquez's Los Meninas is more than a royal portrait. It's a hall of mirrors where nothing is quite as it seems. The painting's centerpiece, that enigmatic mirror reflecting King Philip IV and Queen Mariana, has puzzled scholars for centuries. But tilt your head just slightly and the angles betray a ghost, the shadowy suggestion of a third figure, hovering where the exiled Count Duke of Olivers should stand. This wasn't an artistic mistake, it was a calculated omission. Olivers, once the king's most powerful advisor, had orchestrated policies that led to Portugal's bloody revolt and independence in 1640. By 1656, when Velázquez painted this scene, Spain had scrubbed Olivers from official history, but the artist left traces of his absence like a phantom limb. The mirror itself is the ultimate sleight of hand. While it reflects the monarchs, their images are warped, blurred, as if power itself bends reality. Velázquez, as court painter, knew better than anyone how the crown manipulated perception. The royal couple's distorted faces might symbolize the way authority twists truth to fit its narrative, especially regarding Portugal. The rebellion had been a catastrophic blow to Spanish prestige, and the court worked tirelessly to downplay it. By placing the reflection at the painting's vanishing point, Velázquez makes it the literal focus of perspective, reminding us that history is written from a single, carefully controlled vantage. But the real smoking gun is the Maltese cross stitched onto the maid's dress. At first glance, it's a decorative detail, but the Order of Malta played a quiet yet pivotal role in the Portugal debacle. They'd smuggled funds and messages to Portuguese rebels under the guise of religious charity, their ships slipping past Spanish blockades. The cross, positioned at the maid's heart, is a whisper of this clandestine support. Velázquez, who'd traveled with the order during his Italian years, would have known their secrets, and this tiny emblem becomes his signature on a coded confession. Then there's the artist's own presence in the scene, standing boldly before his canvas. He's not just painting the Infanta Margarita and her attendants, he's painting us, the viewers, pulling us into the conspiracy. The empty frame of his easel mirrors the empty space where Olivers should be, a visual echo of erasure. Even the light streaming in from the side window doesn't illuminate the missing count. It stops short, as if obeying unspoken orders. What makes Los Meninas so revolutionary isn't just what it shows, it's what it refuses to hide. The strewn brushstrokes, the uneasy glances of the court dwarfs, the way the Infanta's gaze meets ours with unsettling directness, all of it undermines the facade of absolute control. Velázquez didn't just capture a moment, he trapped an entire empire's unspoken anxieties in pigment and canvas. The mirror, the cross, the absent advisor, they're not just details. They're a silent revolt, proving that even in the most controlled spaces, truth has a way of seeping through the cracks. Fra Angelico's The Last Judgment should be a straightforward scene of divine justice, sinners cast down, the righteous ascending in radiant white robes. But look closer and the painting fractures into something far more unsettling. Among the sea of saved souls glowing in purity, one cluster stands apart, their robes a dull, earthy beige. This isn't an artistic oversight, it's a whisper of the Cathars, a sect the Church had spent centuries eradicating. By 1431, when Fra Angelico painted this work for the Dominican order, the Cathars were supposed to be extinct, their beliefs scrubbed from history. Yet here they are, hovering at paradise's edge, their presence a quiet act of defiance in the very heart of Inquisition territory. The Cathars weren't just heretics, they were existential threats. They rejected the Church's authority, saw the material world as evil, and preached that salvation came through direct spiritual knowledge. Their radical dualism struck at the core of Catholic doctrine, and the Albigensian Crusade had slaughtered them by the thousands. But Fra Angelico, a Dominican friar himself, seems to have preserved their memory in pigment. Those beige robes aren't random. They mirror descriptions of the perfecti, Cathar spiritual leaders who wore undyed wool as a sign of humility. The artist could have painted them in hellfire as church propaganda demanded. Instead, he placed them in limbo, excluded from the rainbow's promise, yet not fully condemned. Then there's the Devil's Throne, a grotesque parody of the papal tiara. Its three tiers mirror the Pope's triple crown, but twisted into a monstrous grin. This isn't just symbolism, it's subversion. The Dominicans were the Inquisition's enforcers, tasked with rooting out heresy. For Fra Angelico to sneak this jab at papal corruption into a commission for his own order is staggering, like a detective leaving evidence of the crime at the scene. The devil's clawed fingers clutch souls not with fury, but with bureaucratic precision, echoing the cold machinery of the Inquisition itself. But the real masterpiece of coded dissent is the rainbow arching over the saved. In medieval art, rainbows symbolized God's covenant with humanity, a bridge between heaven and earth. Yet Fra Angelico's rainbow stops abruptly, its colors fading before they reach the beige-clad figures. The message is brutal in its simplicity. Divine mercy has limits, and the Church decides where they lie. The Cathars, who believed all souls could return to God, are literally painted outside the covenant, a visual gag order on their theology. What makes this painting so extraordinary isn't just its hidden references, but its survival. Hung in the Dominican convent of San Marco, it was seen daily by the very men who hunted heresy. Yet they missed the clues, or perhaps chose to. Fra Angelico's gentle reputation as the angelic friar may have shielded him, his artistry a cloak for quiet rebellion. The Last Judgment endures as a paradox, a sanctioned painting that smuggles in forbidden ideas, a testament to the truth that even in the darkest times, art finds ways to remember what power tries to forget. Jacques-Louis David's The Coronation of Napoleon is less a painting than a staged coup in oils. At first glance, it's a dazzling spectacle, Napoleon crowning Josephine, the Pope looking on, a cathedral teeming with Europe's elite. But every brushstroke here is a lie, meticulously crafted to rewrite history. Take Pope Pius VII, his hands raised as if blessing the ceremony. David's preliminary sketches tell a different story. The pontiff sits stiffly, arms folded, his face a mask of silent protest. Napoleon demanded the alteration, forcing David to transform defiance into submission with a flick of paint. The message was clear: even God's representative on earth would bend to the emperor's will, if not in life, then at least on canvas. Then there's Josephine, her ermine-lined robe pooling luxuriously around her. The fabric isn't just a symbol of royalty, it's a visual alibi. Beneath it, her fingers clutch her dress with white-knuckled tension, a detail only visible in infrared scans. This wasn't just pre-coronation nerves, it was dread. Napoleon had already confided to aides that he would annul their marriage if she failed to produce an heir. The robe's opulence isn't just decoration, it's a smokescreen, hiding the tremors of a woman who knew her crown came with an expiration date. Even the cathedral's grandeur is a sleight of hand. Those towering banners draped across the arches, their strategic cover-ups. The ceremony occurred on a Sunday, a direct violation of canon law which forbade coronations on the Sabbath. The flags obscure the windows, masking the daylight that would have revealed the scandalous timing. David, ever the loyal propagandist, turned sacrilege into spectacle, using fabric and shadow to sanctify Napoleon's calculated blasphemy. But the most audacious fiction lies in the crowd. Nearly every face reflects awed submission, but one figure stands out, Napoleon's mother, seated prominently in the balcony. In reality, she boycotted the event, furious at her son's hubris. David painted her in any way, a silent assertion that even family dissent could be airbrushed into obedience. The composition itself reinforces the illusion Napoleon stands at the exact center, the lines of perspective radiating outward like sunbeams, casting him as the literal focal point of the universe. What makes this painting so chilling isn't just its deceit, but its success. For 2 centuries, it shaped perceptions of Napoleon's legitimacy, proving that art could be mightier than reality. David didn't just document a coronation, he staged one, turning rebellion into reverence with every stroke. The coronation endures as a masterclass in power, not just the power to rule, but the power to redefine truth itself. And in that, it reveals the darkest lesson of all, that history belongs not to those who live it, but to those who paint it. Turner's The Fighting Temeraire hangs in the collective memory as a nostalgic elegy, a majestic warship, hero of Trafalgar, dragged to its grave by a squat, modern tugboat. But look beyond the golden sunset, and the painting cracks open to reveal a far darker voyage. That ghostly glow staining the sky isn't just artistic drama. It mirrors first-hand accounts of slave ships at twilight, their decks stained with the same otherworldly light. The Temeraire itself, stripped of its guns before Turner painted it, wasn't just a retired relic, it was a silent accomplice. For years, it had escorted British slave traders through contested waters, its cannons ensuring the smooth passage of human cargo. The missing artillery isn't an omission, it's an erasure, scrubbing the ship's complicity from the canvas just as Britain was scrubbing its role from the history books. Then there's the tugboat, belching thick black smoke across the serene water. Industrial progress, hardly. Turner's contemporaries would have recognized the visual echo. Steam-powered vessels like this were already replacing slave ships in the transatlantic trade, their engines powering cotton mills hungry for the very crop slaves harvested. The tug's smokestack mirrors the descriptions of factory chimneys in Manchester and Liverpool, cities built on the profits of plantations. The irony is brutal. The Temeraire, once a protector of slavery, is now itself a captive, dragged by the same mechanized force it helped birth. Turner isn't mourning the past, he's exposing the lie that progress ever really changes who suffers. But the real masterpiece of subversion is the composition itself. The tugboat's diagonal thrust cuts the painting like a blade, its rope taut with tension while the Temeraire floats listlessly, its sails eerily slack. This isn't a peaceful transition, it's a violent transfer of power. Even the colors tell a story. The ship's white hull reflects the dying light, but the water beneath it swirls with murky blues and grays, as if the sea itself rejects the sanitized narrative. Turner could have painted the Temeraire in battle, glorious and guns blazing. Instead, he shows it hollowed out, a spectral shell of its former self, because the truth was this: empires don't fade away. They just find new ways to chain the world. What makes this painting so prescient is its refusal to comfort. The sunset isn't beautiful, it's sickly. the sky thick with the residue of burning coal and forgotten crimes. The Temeraire's famous three masts are reduced to a crucifixion silhouette against the haze, a martyr to Britain's selective memory. Turner, who'd sketched slave ships firsthand as a young man, knew exactly what he was doing. The painting debuted just as Parliament was voting to finally abolish slavery in name, while doubling down on the industries that still relied on it in practice. By stripping the guns and staining the sky, Turner crafted more than a metaphor. He made a mirror, forcing Britain to confront its reflection in the oily water. The Fighting Temeraire isn't just a ship being scrapped, it's a nation's conscience towed inch by inch into the dark. And in that slow, silent procession, Turner asks the question we're still answering. When the light fades, what exactly are we pretending not to see? Delacroix's Liberty leading the people erupts with chaos, a barefoot woman storming the barricades, the tricolour flag whipping overhead, bodies strewn at her feet. But this iconic celebration of France's 1830 revolution hides a quieter, darker rebellion. That Phrygian cap Liberty wears, its red tip slicing through the smoke, isn't just a symbol of freedom. It's a direct link to the Huguenots, France's persecuted Protestant minority. For centuries, they'd been forced into exile, their faith outlawed, their very identity scrubbed from public life. By crowning liberty with their emblem, Delacroix didn't just glorify the present uprising, he resurrected a silenced history, stitching the Huguenot struggle into the fabric of modern France. Now study the fallen soldier sprawled at her feet. His uniform isn't from 1830. It's a relic of the 1790s, the era of the First Revolution. This isn't an anachronism, it's a deliberate sleight of hand. By conflating the two uprisings, Delacroix dodged censorship. The new monarchy, eager to distance itself from the bloody excesses of the past, couldn't object to a scene celebrating their revolution if it also tacitly honored its predecessor. The soldier's outstretched arm mirrors classical depictions of martyrs, turning him into a bridge between rebellions, a silent plea not to repeat the same mistakes. But the real bombshell lies beneath the paint. Infrared imaging reveals Delacroix's first draft included a shattered crucifix half buried in the rubble, its broken base jutting from the cobblestones like a fractured bone. The church, still a powerhouse in post-revolutionary France, wouldn't tolerate such blasphemy. Under pressure, Delacroix obscured it, smudging the cross into indistinct debris. Yet the ghost of it remains, a faint scar in the pigment, a reminder that revolutions don't just topple kings, they fracture faiths. Then there's the flag itself, its folds billowing with calculated precision. Zoom in, and the fabric's shadows coalesce into a profile of Napoleon, his iconic silhouette emerging from the rippling fabric like a spectre. After his defeat in 1815, any public glorification of the emperor was strictly forbidden. Delacroix's solution: hide him in plain sight, letting the flag's motion cloak the banned image in patriotism. The effect is chilling. Napoleon, the man who both betrayed and codified the revolution's ideals, literally woven into its symbol, his presence as inescapable as the past itself. What makes this painting so revolutionary isn't just what it shows, it's what it refuses to let us forget. The boy waving pistols beside Liberty isn't just a spirited rebel, he echoes the child martyrs of the Huguenot persecutions. The smoke-choked sky doesn't just suggest battle, it mirrors the pyres of heresy trials. Even Liberty's bare breast, often misinterpreted as mere allegory, recalls the exposed torsos of persecuted women in Protestant propaganda. Delacroix didn't just paint a moment, he compressed centuries of resistance into a single frame, proving that no victory is ever clean, and no revolution truly starts from zero. The genius of Liberty leading the people lies in its layers. To the authorities, it was a thrilling but manageable tribute to the latest regime change. To those who knew how to look, it was a palimpsest, every brushstroke whispering the names of the erased, the exiled, the silenced. Delacroix's liberty doesn't just march forward. She drags the ghosts of France's bloody conscience behind her, their weight bending the very fabric of the flag she carries. And in that tension between triumph and memory, the painting becomes something far more dangerous than propaganda. It becomes a mirror, forcing France to confront what it claimed to have left behind. Édouard Manet's The Execution of Emperor Maximilian isn't just a historical scene. It's a blood-stained accusation, painted with the precision of a courtroom sketch. At first glance, the composition feels eerily familiar. A firing squad, their rifles leveled, smoke still curling from the barrels as their victim slumps against the wall. But the devil is in the details, and Manet loaded everyone with dynamite. Those soldiers' uniforms, crisp and unmistakable, are French. This wasn't artistic license, it was a last-minute alteration, a deliberate finger pointed straight at Napoleon III. The emperor had installed Maximilian as a puppet ruler in Mexico, then abandoned him to revolutionaries when the mission soured. By dressing the executioners as French infantry, Manet exposed the hypocrisy of an empire that waged war by proxy, then washed its hands of the consequences. The empty cartridge cases scattered on the ground aren't just set dressing, they form a jagged V shape, a grotesque parody of victory. In French military tradition, V stood for valor and victoire, symbols of honor and triumph. Here their litter, discarded like the promises France made to Maximilian. The spent casings gleam dully in the light, each one a silent indictment of the empire's broken word. Even the firing squad's posture drips with damning realism. The sergeant leans casually on his rifle, his stance mirrored in actual photographs of French colonial executions. This wasn't the stiff, heroic martyrdom of official propaganda. It was the banality of state-sanctioned murder, captured with clinical detachment. But the true power of these paintings lies in their afterlife. Banned from public exhibition, they circulated like contraband, passed hand to hand among artists and dissidents. Manet produced multiple versions, each one tweaking the details like a prosecutor refining an argument. In one, the sky is stormy, echoing the moral tempest behind the act. In another, the wall behind Maximilian is peppered with bullet holes from previous executions, a chilling reminder that this was just another day's work for the regime. The compositions borrow deliberately from Goya's The 3rd of May 1808, linking Napoleon III's crimes to the atrocities of his uncle's reign. The most haunting detail, though, is Maximilian himself. Unlike the noble, Christ-like figures of traditional martyrdom, he's painted mid-collapse, his body awkwardly folding as if the weight of betrayal is too much to bear. His epaulets, symbols of imperial authority, are already askew, as if the moment his life ends, so does the fiction of his power. The Mexican soldiers, often erased from official accounts, stand firm in Manet's version, their sombreros and rugged clothing a stark contrast to the French uniforms. This wasn't just a painting about European politics. It was a rare acknowledgement of the Mexican voices Europe had tried to silence. Manet's genius was in turning rejection into a weapon. Denied a public platform, he turned private viewings into acts of sedition, forcing Paris's elite to confront what their government had done in the shadows. The paintings weren't just critiques, they were evidence, mounting a case against empire with every brushstroke. Today, they hang in museums as masterpieces. But look closely, and you can still smell the gunpowder, still hear the echo of the shots, and the silence of a nation that chose to look away. These 21 paintings are more than masterpieces, they're time machines, each one a portal to a history that wasn't supposed to survive. Think about it. While kings burned documents and the church banned books, artists smuggled truths onto canvas, hiding revolutions in the folds of a saint's robe and political dissent in the curve of a mirror. What makes these works so extraordinary isn't just their beauty, but their bravery. Every brushstroke was a gamble, every symbol a silent act of defiance against the people who wanted the past rewritten their way. Take Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights, where a banned religious sect's utopian vision blooms under the Inquisition's nose, or Velázquez's Los Meninas, where a single mirror reflects not just royalty, but the ghosts of advisors erased from history. These artists weren't just painting, they were archiving, preserving stories too dangerous for paper, and they did it so well that centuries later, we're still peeling back their layers, still decoding their secrets. Here's the thing about hidden histories, they don't stay buried. The cracks in the official narrative always show, if you know where to look, a halo that shouldn't glow. A uniform changed last minute, a date hidden in plain sight. These aren't mistakes, they're breadcrumbs left by artists who knew the real story wouldn't fit in the history books. So the next time you stand in front of a painting, don't just admire it, interrogate it. Ask why that shadow falls exactly there, why that figure's face is turned away, why that object sits just so. Because art isn't passive, it's a conversation, one that spans centuries, and somewhere in those layers of pigment and varnish, there's a voice whispering, look closer. The truth is right here. If this dive into Europe's secret past has left you seeing art in a new light, let us know which revelation stunned you most. Was it Caravaggio's coded sunlight or Turner's haunted worship? The comments are your canvas, paint them with your thoughts. And if you're hungry for more stories hiding in plain sight, hit that subscribe button. The museum's doors are always open, and the next masterpiece is waiting to spill its secrets. Remember, history isn't just written by the victors, sometimes it's painted by the rebels.